Hi,
Hey
Sean.
Tony, how's it going?
It's going good.
Good.
Can
Whereabouts in the world are you?
I'm in Michigan, a place called Cadillac, Michigan, in the U.S.
Okay, yeah, I had a few buddies out of Michigan when I was in the States. And do you want to just tell the viewers a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah. Well, there's no easy way to say it in a nutshell, but I'm a normal guy, and I was taken into a black program when I was a kid, and then shipped through many different programs, and then put back in what they call a 20 and back service. And they put me back with my memories erased, and it wasn't until much later 2015, May of 2015, I had like a major memory recall, and I got all these crazy memories back, and I thought I was cracking up, or I thought something was going on. So I knew that I couldn't. I knew that there was too much there to ignore, and the things that I were remembering that I wasn't going to get help in with a like a mainstream psycho. I wanted to go to counseling about it. So I started working with some researchers, and things that I remembered that no one else could have known, that there's no way that it could have been a fantasy, checked out and began to check out and have continued to check out over the last 6 years. And I got, it just, I had a great deal of recall about serving in space on colonies that we have established, that governments have established already in the solar system and beyond. And that's actually a technologies that through technologies they've traded with extraterrestrials, that they're taking people and having them serve, and then putting them back with a radical advanced technology, putting them back the same night that they're taken. So I wrote it all in a book. Finally got my book out. I worked on it like 6 years. It was very difficult to do for me to relive it all, and I got it out. It was a bestseller for the first 6 weeks, and it's still selling well. It's been very well received by the public.
What's the book called, please?
I got a copy right here. I don't know. So this is a different streaming service. So I usually Zoom to interviews that I do, but it's Series Colony Cavalier,
Yeah, we can see it.
and
That's great.
it's on Amazon and it's on my website. I can see somebody's posted it down there in the chat, and since then, so I did my first interview in 2016, and I've had literally thousands of people reach out to me saying that they've been through the same type of thing, that they have memories similar, like thousands of people, a few thousand people. And it got to be so monotonous that I couldn't keep up with everybody. So I made a memory course, like a recorded memory course that's like on a Teachable that people can do. It's like $40 to keep it hosting. And then I do consultations with people, probably 3, 4, or 5 a week, where people call and just kind of sit down, and I just try to make sense. What I found is that there's a lot of common denominators when you're talking about people that have contact, and I'm able to sit down with people and just kind of, because everybody kind of throws it all at you at once. There's a bottleneck of information. There's always so much that happens, and it doesn't make sense. And if you just kind of go, hold on, when did that happen, and try to make sense of it all, a lot of things start lining up with other people that are saying the same thing that couldn't have any way of knowing. So there are things, and then some people know, and some people don't. And I just say, well, maybe I can refer you to this person. I can't. And I'm honest with people, but there's quite a bit of the time. There's a lot of common denominators that are not easily explained away.
All right, so we're going
I
to go over this in
hope
more
that covers
detail,
it.
and we're going to go over this in more detail. But before we go there, then I just want to ask you, because I've had a lot of theories come in about Elon Musk having access to things out of space that we don't know about. Have you come across anything like that?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Like advanced technology, or he's serving some purpose for extraterrestrials that is private to the public?
So I think what he's doing with SpaceX, and if you look at a lot of the technologies he's trying to introduce, these are kind of necessary things for us to go to join a interstellar community. And some people are, demonize him quite a bit, and some people don't. I like what he's doing. It needs to be done, and not everybody's perfect. So it's like you can pick me apart if you choose to. It's very easy to do, and anybody can be picked apart. So the one thing that I found peculiar, there is one detail that I found very peculiar about the Starlink, the satellite system, the internet system. The very first satellites the very first satellites went live over Antarctica, and not over like the equator, not to where you would have a population center. But he was on another podcast, I'm not going to name drop on your show. I don't know your legalities, so I won't say any names. But he was on in front of a huge audience on a podcast, and he said, "Well,
Joe Rogan."
And he asked him, "So where are they live?" And he said, "Over the poles." So the very first place they put internet for the Starlink system was over the poles. So why on earth would you do that when you think you would string it around 20 degrees latitude and get most of the population on the service and start monetizing the service if that's really what you're about? There's absolutely no reason to be on the poles unless it was a system that was in place by some of these breakaway civilizations that are existing in the poles, specifically Antarctica. And it's well known. It's I can't say well known, but it's been discussed very widely that the United States and the UK and Canada have their secret space program based in the North Pole in Canada, in the Arctic Circle in Canada, and some of those islands up there. That's where that's based at. And the German breakaway civilization took Antarctica after the war. So that was something that's peculiar. So I don't have a lot of. But the Neuralink chip, I think that's something that is pretty scary, but also necessary. You think about the ability to translate in real time. All of a sudden, everybody would have every language available to them. The entire planet would be able to communicate, one-on-one basis. It would really solve a lot of problems in the world. So I think that's it's kind of a necessary thing. We're going to get a version of it, whether sooner or later. And if we don't like it because we're old school, the kids or our kids' kids are going to adopt that technology. The problem is it's a two-way street. If you can access their information in your head, they can access the information in your head too. So, I don't want to go on the record as pro or con against it, but I think that's kind of something that's going to happen. And I think a lot of these technologies are a stepping stone to joining in the interstellar community, which there is actually. Space it's not far away. It's teeming with life, and it's very easy to go very, very far in space.
All right, so let's just go back over your life more slowly then. You said you were raised in Michigan. And,
yes.
What kind of things did your parents do and how did they meet?
Wow. First time I've ever been asked that. So my mom's from Michigan. My dad's from Hawaii. And he was in the Navy, and he got out and he was working for... the lasers on the moonshot on the observatory in Hawaii for the University of Michigan. And he took a short trip to Michigan, like a short post just to travel. And he met my mom and decided to stay. And he worked for a automaker here. It's in the book. Actually, some of it's in the book, but he worked for an automaker here. And, we grew up just outside of the Detroit area is where I was. And I had contact in school with somebody who said his dad was an Illuminati. What's your dad do? It was a kid in the advanced learning class that I was in. And it wasn't. And then his dad came in for the science fair and I met him. And it was a day or two after that I was taken. So
going before that, going back to your dad then, you said he was working in an observatory. Did your dad have an interest in the skies and space and that kind of thing?
Not really. He wasn't really big into it. My dad was more of a cowboy. He was more into horse riding and working on cars kind of guy. He wasn't really a tech person at all.
What about your mom? Was she into anything heavenly?
My mom's always been a sci-fi fan. That was something that we always did as a kid. When I was young, we'd sit around and watch Star Trek together, my mom and I. But my dad had none of it, and so that's how that was. But no. Not per se. We were pretty normal, pretty middle class, middle of the road, normal family growing up.
And what were your interests in school?
School, I did a little bit of sports. Before I was 10 years old when I was taken, and before that I was an outstanding student, and after that I completely withdrew from school. And so I was pretty, I don't want to say antisocial, but I kind of didn't I was introverted after that. And I did sports, but I didn't really care for the team sports. So I was into bicycle racing and BMX stuff. And wasn't really an outstanding student after that. It was like fourth grade that I was taken. Before that, I was an outstanding student, top 5% of the school. And after that, I completely withdrew.
So what was the process of being taken at age 10 then?
You mean that night? What happened?
Yes.
We had an old style. We lived in an old style farmhouse on about 13 acres where we'd sold off some of the land. It was a farm in Michigan, and very old house. And we had the old ringer phone, with the long cord that everybody had back in 1982. And the phone started ringing, and there were bright lights. So my house was very, very far away, a matter of half mile from the nearest house from our neighbor. We were kind of all on our own in fields, and there were bright lights shining down from the sky above the house, and it would shine, and you could feel like a static electricity. It would come and go, and then the phone would ring, and nobody answered it, which was strange because my mom always made a good point that no matter what time of day you could call her for an emergency, and she did. So that was odd, but I couldn't move. Nobody really woke up, and then the lights came back, and it happened several times, and then there was a bright blue orb that came into the house and crackled, and came into my room and went down the hall and down the you could hear it go down the staircase, and it was flying. It was a blue orb, and then all the lights went out, everything's quit, and I tried to go back to sleep. And when I woke up again, I had a gray standing, right over my bed, standing in my face. And my dad was a prankster. He always pulled jokes on us every, like April 1st, April Fool's Day was his favorite holiday. And I said, Dad, take the mask off. You're not being funny, And I reached up and touched it, and it was alive. It was cold and wet, and it had big pores. And I was shocked and fear. And before I could scream, before I could make a noise, it did something to me, and I was paralyzed. And then three or four others, shorter reptilian-looking beings, came from the foot of my bed and grabbed me out of bed and carried me off into a flash of light. And I woke up on a table in a base somewhere. I don't think I was on a ship. I think I was on a base, an underground base somewhere.
And what were they doing to you on the table?
It was a medical examination, and then they did they said that, so they were at this point, they were communicating with me telepathically. I was scared. They said, be calm. It's okay. You're not going to be hurt. We're not going to hurt you. And I said, what's going on? I was freaked out. I was in complete shock. And when I began to calm down, whether or not it was an external thing that they gave me to help me calm down, I began to be happy, excited. I thought this was first contact. I thought that the world was going to change the next day, that here I knew ETs were real, and here they are. And they said they wanted my help, and they had to check my genetics to see if I was capable of their program they wanted. And it was painful, and they took like a biopsy, like they took cells from the back of my head, and they had to wait. We had to wait for 20 minutes or so, 20 or 30 minutes for the results to come back. And when they did, they said that I had the genetics, but just barely. I could go once. And they asked me they said they were going to have me, they wanted my help, was how they worded it. And they wanted me to help them. And I was going to go on a 20-year tour, that I was very lucky that this was going to happen. I was going to live an extra 20 years of life. And I said, no, I can't do that. I'm going to miss my family and everything. And he said, no, there's going to be time. We can travel time. And he was explaining it to me, a reptilian. And he said, you can travel time. You're going to be gone. We're going to put you back tomorrow morning, and you may or may not have all your memories back to tell your story, but you're going to live 20 years. This is a blessing for you. So I said, okay. So I consented, and then he laid me down and did a procedure. There was a needle that went in my eye, into the tear duct of my eye. And I woke up with no memories in a base in a building at the Inyokern Airport, and began a program there. It was a black program. The thing is, when I got my memories back of that time, of when it began, basically the first day of the 20 years. So I had no memory of who I was. I woke up with a doctor examining a human on Earth in California, a doctor examining me and asking me if I remembered where I came from. Do I have any brothers? And I remembered nothing. I had complete amnesia. And I did for that whole 20 years. I had no memory of where I came from. But I remember the area quite well when I got my memories back, and I looked. And what I found was that, so I hired a private investigator at some point, and I've dealt with other researchers, and people have volunteered to help me investigate. And what we found was that those 3 buildings that I identified years ago at Inyokern, I believe that they were portables. They were like small office buildings that we went through a trauma-based program. It turns out when we tried to find records of them, so somebody went on to the database in the United States. There's a database for tax purposes of every structure in the nation. Every building in the nation belongs to this database so that it can be assessed for taxes. So these buildings didn't exist, and there's pictures on Google. I can show you a picture. So the buildings do not exist on that database. And so then an investigator further found out that they're classified as a special district, which is only beholden to Congress and not applicable to the local law enforcement. So we were kids being tortured in those buildings, and it was perfectly legal. That was like the supporting evidence that I found out after the fact. I've also found quite a bit of a paper trail of the funding of Project Grill Flame. It was an offshoot of Project Grill Flame for the CIA, which morphed into Project Center Lane and then on to Project Gateway. I found the funding of that and all the dates. And there are people that I've identified that I've only worked with researchers, and I don't really name drop publicly because these are people that are still alive and obviously still very dangerous, and I have a family to protect. So I've only worked with researchers, and I have been contacted by people from the government in the past about my testimony, and worked with them about some things like covert people from the government got a hold of me and wanted me to be a consultant to them for some things that I said. But so I have given the names. So some people have said, "Man, you went through all this, and you're not protecting their identities. You're just as guilty as they are." But I just want people to know that I have shared the names with proper people. So it turns out that a lot of the things that I remember checked out not only from Inyokern, but then I went to Seattle and then to a town in Peru. And what they did was they had put us through like an MK Ultra based trauma based mind control program, and then they were giving us drugs to bring us near to death. So we'd get an IV, and there was a drug, and we were all 10, 11-year-old kids, and during that time we would channel information, and so they were using us for what I was unconscious at the time. But when I woke up, some people said that I spoke a different language, that they could ask me questions, and they were getting past and future events like accurate. Like they had their own psychics that they could turn on and off with these kids, with the class of kids so this was a program that they did that was from what I remember, very successful. After that, about 13, I lost the ability. When I started to get into puberty, when they would put me under, I would get very sick from it. And it was more and more gibberish that I would say, that I would report. So they sent me back, and I was privately owned by somebody in the Seattle area. And I had a great deal of memory from that. In 2016, after my first interview, I flew there. I went to California to do an interview for Exopolitics. And then I went to the house in Seattle because I remembered it. And not only did I remember the house, but I remembered the entire area around it. I went to the store that we used to go to, and it's very easy for me to prove that I've never been there in my organic life. In my normal timeline, I've never been to that place. But I knew where the store was. I knew my way around the store. They had a bin with cheap candy. I knew it. I called it out. I was on the phone with researchers, but outside, I said, I know this is the store, and I know inside they had a little bin they had 5-cent candies. I went in 2016, and there are 35-cent candies now. Like the price went up, but the bin is still there exactly how it was. The store is just how I remembered it. There was a beach nearby there that we went, and I remembered the rocks. Before, it was a very surreal experience to go to this place and know it. And I said, up around the corner, the rocks get bigger. Right now the rocks on the beach are small, but you go around the corner, and sure enough, they went to like golf ball size rocks. And I was just freaking out because really, if you read the book, a lot of what I went through was very horrible. I experienced a lot of very bad things, abuse, especially in the early years. A lot of people, that's a review I get a lot, is like, man, I had no idea that this book was so bad, and some people couldn't even finish it. They said, I couldn't finish it. I donated it to the library. This book is, they think they're going to get a Star Trek episode when they buy the book, and that's not what it is. It's a very shocking account of what I went. But you know what? Everything that I say in it is presented as evidence, because later on, it could be every little thing I had to keep in there because it's evidence. It's what I remembered.
All right, so I've got several questions with what you've just said. Then, so how deep are the CIA into this?
Well, it's not the CIA anymore. Quite. They are very deep in it. And there's another book by a researcher that I've worked with, Dr. Sala, called Space Force, about the creation of the Space Force. And in there's quite a bit of information about the origin of the NRO office in the United States, the National Reconnaissance Office, that Kennedy tried to put in place, and then later, after he was assassinated, that the CIA assumed it, and all the space assets from the CIA went to the NRO. That they actually had in the 70s manned space stations, 3 of them, with real-time surveillance of every bit of the Earth. Every bit of the Earth. They had like 80 people on it, and these are the von Braun donut stations with gravity. They're the rotating ones that they put these up in the 60s, and in the 70s they were operational. So yeah, the CIA is a tool for the space program. So I'm trying to respond to some of these comments here. What I'm saying is that book is a really good idea, as a really good starting place for documented things for people, because the official budget for the CIA, I think, is like $40 billion or $60 billion a year. And they did an audit in 2005 and found out that it's more like $1.1 trillion in spending the CIA has. This is an organization with only 30,000 or 40,000 employees. So spending $1 trillion a year. They've got their own secret space program, but it's not on the level that the breakaway civilizations are. And in fact, it's an apparatus of the breakaway civilizations. So the CIA, basically all of the intelligence organizations around the world for every country, is just one organization that is beholden to the breakaway civilizations of the interplanetary corporate conglomerate. So
my next question is, then, you mentioned MK Ultra and some of the horrors of that. What else did you experience in MK Ultra?
Well, it was what's funny is that when I researched the people and the places around Inyokern, that I remembered that I actually found that they had staff that was ex MK Ultra staff, and they had adapted actually a new spin on it using sleep deprivation. And that was one of the very first things that I remembered, is that we went through the video programming where they would drug us. We were suspended in chairs, and they would drug us, and we would watch movies that were a blend of cartoon and training movies with animals and people being butchered. It would flash really fast with subliminal messages, and it was like, it would go on and on, 8 hours. It was on a reel-to-reel, and it would stop and rewind and play again all day long. And then in between, they would traumatize us by various means. But that lasted for a matter of weeks, and then they started with sleep deprivation, where they would wake us up. And some of these comments are great. The live chat is great. But once the sleep deprivation started, I really lost track of all time. Like, I had no idea how long I was there after that. They were waking us up every 15 or 20 minutes in the middle of the night. Lights would come on and a loud buzzer, and they'd come and wake us up. We'd stand next to our bed. We had little bunks that we stepped, and they would come and slap us, and we could go back to sleep. And then they'd do it again. They'd come and electrically shock us with a cattle prod, and then you could go back to sleep. So what that taught you was that when we were shocked, we would just go into a catatonic state and await command. And I'm reading some of these. So there was that. And then we got to a certain point. They were testing us. They began to test us. And they you know, it was a long, I think that's covered in the book as well. So without wasting a lot of time in your interview, how that went on, they tested us, and most of the class of kids passed and went on to something called theta, that we qualified for theta. And that's when they began with the remote viewing exercises. And then we used various techniques from the Monroe Institute. People from the Monroe Institute, or people that were versed in the Monroe Institute techniques of out of body, were there, and we did that. They had a pretty extensive stereo system that they had us with headphones plugged into, and certain drugs we were doing out of body, and then eventually the near death drugs that they were giving us. And when that worked, they that was it. They sent us off to all the kids that were in that class. We got sent off individually to our posts where we were going. I ended up ultimately in Peru, a place called Puerto Tawantinsuyo, Peru. And I was on an airplane. Once a month, they would ship an airplane load of cocaine from there to Santa Marta, Colombia, where it would, I don't know where it would went, but they said that they lost an airplane and that they had to pay for me to be there. And when we would get up in the air, we'd get over the state of Acre, north of Peru, and I had an IV put in my arm, and he would give me the drug. And he said that I had a handler, a young guy, that was the only person that spoke English in the village, and he was not happy about being stuck with me as his job, but just because he knew English. But after a while, he had a whole notepad of questions from people in the village to ask me questions, and while I was under. So he said that there were times when I spoke fluent Spanish. I still don't know Spanish to this day. I spoke fluent Spanish. He said he spoke to his dead grandmother. He said he spoke to people and things came true. Said that there were different voices coming through me while I was in this drug state, and it would last 8 hours or so. 8 or 9 hours that I would be under, and then I would be sick for a few days afterwards, and then we'd fly back. And it was about once a month we did those flights.
What year was it you saw the cocaine flights?
So 82, 83. It was 83. I was there in, I believe, January of 83, or January, February of 83 is when I got to Peru, because there was a kid with an 82 t-shirt and they were making fun of him, saying that was last year's shirt. Like he had just got a brand new t-shirt that said, remember the old ones that had 82 on them? And so that's the only real reason I know the dates. And I was there for about 2 years. So 83 till 85. And then I was back to Seattle from 85 to 86, and then sold off into the space program in 87, all the way to 2000.
I've written books on where that cocaine was going. I wrote one book called America Made Who Killed Barry Seal, George H.W. Bush, or Pablo Escobar, and those flights were going to military bases in America, like in Arkansas, Texas, Arizona, and getting distributed to Americans while they were fighting a war on drugs. Same people. But
that's interesting.
That's a whole different story. We've got a viewer has asked, do you believe an asteroid is going to hit us in 2030?
No, I don't. At this point, I can tell you that the space programs are well developed, that an asteroid doesn't have a chance of hitting the Earth unless they let it. So if an asteroid did hit us, it would be weaponized. There's no way that it would get here. They can intercept all asteroids easily.
Linda wants to know whether you ever had fuzzy vision, like a bad TV connection.
I'd have to say no. I mean, South, that's kind of vague, but I'd have to say no.
So while this was going on in you've gone past the age of 10, what is your parents' reaction to this? And you said earlier that your personality completely changed. Surely they noticed that and tried to do something about it?
So, right. So that's a question I get a lot. Where were your parents while you were gone? But the truth is, at the end of the 20 years, they put me back. I was back the same day. I was taken on a Thursday night out of my house in Michigan, and I woke up Friday morning back in my bed. And I had no memory of what had just happened, but I had the experience. I had the feeling, if that makes sense, of not being there home for 20 years. I got out of bed and I looked at my toys on the ground, and I had no interest in them anymore. And I was like refamiliarizing myself. I went to school that day and got lost. I couldn't find I raised my hand for the teacher to use the bathroom. and it's a small school, not a big school. And she said, "Sure, go to the bathroom." And I said, "Where is it?" And so the whole class laughed at me. The teacher was like, "What is wrong with you?" Because it was close and it was toward the end of the school year. There's no way I could have forgotten it. So she called my mom and said, "I might have amnesia. Get me checked out to the doctor." My parents, I did change quite a bit. And my dad would often say, "You changed, man." My dad would say, "I want my son back. I don't know what happened to you, but I want my son back," because I would say stuff that was not typical of a kid. I had a personality change. There's no other way to say it. It's kind of, I don't know how to describe it. I really don't.
So we've had a number of questions come in one sentence here. Is there oxygen on Mars, the moon, and what's the story on Pluto? And is there something rattling in your room? Because we can hear a little rattle there.
Oh, that's me fidgeting. I'm just fidgety.
Oh yeah, let's
sorry.
We need to get you a squeeze ball so it'd be quiet.
That's what I need, or a punch ball or something.
Yeah.
So Pluto, we were not allowed to go to. We were told we flew missions by Pluto from the Kuiper Belt. We would fly with sometime, very rarely we'd do a flyby, but the Ceres Colony Corporation, it was called, had no jurisdiction there, was not allowed on Pluto. That there's another species, another entity of extraterrestrials that basically have jurisdiction of Pluto. So we weren't allowed there. The moon, as far as I know, did not have any oxygen. It was a vacuum. And the hangar bays that we flew into were still in vacuum. So people that were working in the hangar bays were in vacuum suits. The Mars atmosphere is a blend, and I believe that we were surgically altered to be able to breathe the atmosphere. And the suit I had was an open face suit that I walked on the surface of Mars with during that program that I was on for a short time. And when we exerted ourselves, the suit would blow oxygen up in our face so we could breathe. And it would conserve oxygen. But I think that there was a surgical procedure that they gave us so that we could breathe the atmosphere there.
Question here about MK Ultra. Wasn't it the Nazi doctors from Operation Paperclip that introduced MK Ultra? And did you have any interaction with those doctors, perhaps?
So no. So the doctor that was in charge of the program was after remote viewing, and that was his specialty. In fact, he had a book. He was reading the entire program out of a stack of manuals, and he was just following like a cookbook of and literally every day he was like, "Today we have to do this," and they would hurt our arm. They would twist our arm, and a few days later they would soak us in ice until we were shivering. Like he was following a very scientific guide on what was happening, and he had books. It was his first time, and there were things that he was appalled by too. So he didn't have it in him really to do it. But he was following a very strict schedule of events that he had from books. So it was obviously, and then the early cages that we were in, they had a surplus of them. So it was an older program that was being dismantled, and the leftovers of it they decided to use on this experiment and run us kids through.
So I've got a question that's off the screen. I'm going to give you this one first from Colleen. She wants to know, did you kill anyone under the influence of MK Ultra?
No, not that I remember. I am also aware that at the very end of the program, they did put us through a training. They put us through a few days of training of killing people, and they were a set of movies, and it would tell you, it would show you the gun and it being loaded, and it would say, 9, the last one is. We had to sing along. 9, the last one is mine, and it would show somebody being murdered. 8, the last one is mine. It showed another murder. 7, the last one is mine, and then it would go all the way down to 1, and then it would, like an explosion, and it would start over again, and we had to sing that over and over again. So as a result, I don't own guns, and I probably shouldn't say that publicly in America, but I'm very pro-gun in America, I would say. But me personally, because I'm aware that programming is in there, I do not own a gun because I'm afraid of someday getting a phone call and being activated and doing something that I would regret. So for that reason, I keep my distance from guns, and I would love to have some. I do enjoy shooting guns, just for the sports part of it. Just for I like shooting bow and arrows at targets. But for that reason, because I lived through that programming and I do have memory of it, I've elected to not be a gun owner.
Kara has asked, do you think DNA holds memory, which is why they took your blood sample during that medical exam?
It absolutely holds memory. I don't know if that's why they took my blood at that time, but the entire Monarch technology of and for this reason, one of the common denominators in many of the people that I work with is their parents and their children. So what I find is that a lot of people that are taken and have credible information about being taken and going through a similar thing, I start asking them, so what'd your mom and dad do, grandpa? Navy? Did you live near a base? And it's like 7 out of 10 times there's Navy.
All right, we're running out of time here then, so we're going to have to ask about what you're up to now and your plans for the future.
Thanks. I'm working on a second book. The first book left a lot of questions. I got to the point where I felt like I was going to keep working on it I worked on the book for 6 years, and people were like, Tony, where's the book? And so I kind of barnstormed the end of it, and I could still be working on it to pack more. There's still more to go. And so it left a lot of questions. I'm going to write a second book. It's going to be more based on the spiritual aspect of what I've went through. I get asked all the time, do you believe in God, this and that? What's the universe like? So there's another account of the book, a short bit that I hope will answer some of that. And so I'm working on that. I'm doing some live talks. I'm not sure if I'm going to go in person to Silicon Valley. I might do a Zoom call to a Silicon Valley talk about technologies that may be introduced and researched from what I remember. I am going to an Orlando conference with a lot of other people, a very big ticket one. And I really enjoy the conferences because when you learn a lot from the people that are there. The going in person is just a much better vibe. So working on the second book and working on my show, Talks with Tony, where I have a lot of people on there that have been through the same thing. And we're seeing a real effort in burying my information. A lot of it got scrubbed off YouTube, and a lot of the information has been we're seeing people come forward with ex-CIA people, and they're just telling just whack information. And so what it is they're trying to bury the needle in a haystack of fake information. So we're seeing that, and I'm just kind of working against it. And so that's why I'm so happy the book is out, because it's hard to undo a book. And the book is a very good, there's a lot in the book that anybody can read and go research themselves and dig up your own. It's a breadcrumbs for a lot of people. So
Sean wants to know if you expect an invasion of the Earth in the future.
I sure hope not. I think that if they were going to do that, they would have done it already long ago, and we would have never been allowed to be where we're at. So I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that, the Earth is already pretty well under control by secret corporate and government organizations that we are unaware of, that the public is unfortunately unaware of. And we see them on the same page, what we saw recently with the pandemic and everything. So they don't have to invade. And we're seeing them fight out who's going to be in control when they do disclose. I think once the cat's out of the bottle, once the genie's out of the bottle, that it doesn't matter who's in charge, because once mankind realizes how the scope of everything out there and how really connected we are to literally trillions of other civilizations, that they're not going to be able to undo it. So once we get a disclosure in any form, it's going to be an avalanche of the truth that comes behind it, no matter what happens. So all we need is disclosure.
Huge thank you, Tony. Absolutely fascinating. We did have Dr. Saller on last week, so if people want to check that out, go to last week's episode. And there's just so many questions have come in for you. We could have gone on all night here. So please check out Tony's links, the book, everything that he's mentioned today, and we will put those links in the description box below this video. So you have a great rest of your day, my friend.
Thanks, Sean. It was great to be here. I love the audience. I love the questions. Thanks, you guys.
Oh, thanks, Tony. Good night. Cheers.